So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Krisha Lenzo, and I'm the Executive Director of Harvard in Tech. It's been a bit of time since we met up over a webinar, but we're so happy that you're joining us this afternoon. So today, you've received our emails about a wonderful program. So I'm going to give you a description and then intro our speaker. We have David Benari. He is the founder and Executive Director of Techie Youth. So a background about Techie Youth. There are currently 3,000 teenagers in New York City foster care, and barely a handful of older teens get adopted each year, and all the rest are age out of that whole component. So considering this extreme scope of the problem, Techie Youth is a charity that gives risk teens free laptops and jumpstarts their tech careers. The Techie Youth approach is definitely sustainable too. It teaches foster youth how they can earn income for themselves and become financially stable and self-sufficient, so they don't need ongoing support, which we think is a great idea. A little bit of background about Eric, and he'll talk more about Techie Youth, but Eric Benari is an IT business expert and master technologist who has founded and or built the infrastructure for a large number of portfolio ventures spanning sectors of social networks, e-commerce, B2B, open source, online advertising, where he was in a senior role at Yahoo, and others. He's been invited to speak at numerous conferences, including NYU, MIT, Harvard, and written for Forbes.com, MIT CIO Corner, and other journals. Finally, he is the organizer of the world's largest community of database technology professionals, chairman coordinator of the biannual Database Month Festival in New York City. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric. He has more in his bio, but I'm going to let him speak, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask everybody if you could all pop open your chat, because I don't like talking into a computer and getting no feedback. Honestly, yeah. I much prefer a real live audience, so we're going to make do with Zoom. But if everyone can open up their chat and get ready to talk back to me via chat, that would be the best, because I'm going to ask you all a question based on a scenario, and I want to know how you'd feel in that scenario, and just sort of type that back, because we're going to start off with like a question before I jump into the water here. If you were talking to someone and you found out a genuine, true statistic that there are thousands of youth in the United States who are living independently without parents, they don't have any parents or immediate family members in their lives, and it turns out in the immediate near future, they are all going to go homeless. How would you feel about that? What would be your immediate reaction? If I could ask you all to type that into the chat. I'm going to sort of skip the punchline while y'all are typing. About 7 years ago, I got some response. Yeah, sadness, frustration, concern, tragic. Tragic is what I felt. So about 7 years ago, I was having a random conversation with a caseworker from foster care. And at the time, I did not know very much at all about foster care. And this is the statistic that I learned. What happens is youth who enter foster care can only stay in foster care as a youth. They reach a certain age, their age of emancipation, where they will lose all of their foster care benefits on their birthday, and that includes housing. Now, the problem is that they're in foster care because they had no family to take them in. If they did, they'd be in kinship care, which is something else. So they have no family, they have no trusted adults, and they have no housing on their birthday. Where do they go? The majority end up homeless, and a lot of them try to make ends meet illegally and end up incarcerated. This is the unfortunate reality. Statistically, nearly all of them end up with that fate. And this sort of broke my heart. And I was like, at first, scared, very scared, tragic, all the things that you guys put in the chat there, that was my feelings as well. But then it sort of occurred to me that I got to do something about this. I'm not going to sit back and just let this be, because it has been this way for many years in this country. And it's the main source of new cases of homelessness in this country. So my background at the time, I was the chief technology officer of a startup, and I had lots of tech background. And I sort of thought to myself, can we use technology to solve this problem? I passed some ideas by by associates who also work from the tech sector, and we sort of got the idea: what if we teach them technology skills? Can they get a tech job, which will be financially sustaining for them, so they can actually pay rent when they reach that age of emancipation? We didn't know if it would work, but we spent about a year in planning and figuring it out. And during that year, we also visited foster care group homes, which are like orphanages for older teenagers, and went there and actually talked to the kids and spoke with them and persuaded about a dozen of them to come to our initial class, which was totally unproven and just a theory at the time. That class was about, if I recall, about 4 hours long, 3 or 4 hours long. And during that time, we taught them all how to disassemble a computer down to parts. And then we said, all right, now it's your turn, put it all back together again without our help. And by the end of that class, every one of those dozen youth could do it. They could put a computer back together, take it apart and put it back together again. We all sort of looked at each other and said that was like the eureka moment. Oh my God, this works. Fast forward to the beginning of 2020, and over 800 youth have gone through our programs in our classrooms around New York City. Then, of course, the pandemic happened, and we were not allowed to do in-person classes because our class sizes were typically about 65 students for 5 hours in an AM class and another 65 in a PM class. We had over 100 youth going through our doors every day. That was very obviously a public gathering, a large gathering. So we were not allowed to do in-person classes during, starting early 2020. So we immediately jumped on and started to build out a platform for remote learning. And the Techie Youth Learn to E-Earn platform was born. We also realized we can't teach them how to become computer support technicians, which is what we were doing before, because you can't physically touch a computer through a computer screen, and it's pretty hard to teach that. So we also shifted our approach with the times, and we started to teach them how they can we started to teach the youth how they can earn income while working remotely from anywhere they are with a computer, which is exactly what they need in our current day and age, when physical jobs are getting backseat to remote jobs. So we started to build this platform out, and this past summer, that just ended, that's just at the end right now, New York City changed the way they operate with foster kids and other at-risk youth, which we began serving shortly after our start up. We started up in November 2015. By June of 2016, no, July of 2016, New York City asked us to, can you, in addition to foster kids, can you also help homeless youth? And can you also help transgendered LGBT youth? And can you help kids who are just from the most severe, heartbreaking backgrounds? Juvenile justice youth was a big one. We about 1/3 of our kids have like criminal records. And we, of course, said yes, yes, and yes to all of them. And that's about where we are at till today. We serve all forms of at-risk youth, with foster kids being the first primary target demographic, because they have a timer going, and when they reach their age of emancipation, they need options. But we help every youth who needs us. So in this past summer, we were asked by New York City, can you take youth in remote settings? And we said yes, of course. And we also were at that point allowed to have in-person classes resume. So we said they can choose whichever they want. As it turns out, New York City didn't have any real options for remote places to put these kids. I didn't know that when we started in June. When we started planning it in June, I had no idea. And it turns out that New York City made us their largest placement site for foster youth and at-risk youth this summer, and we ended up with over 3,000 youth in our program suddenly, overnight. We didn't plan for that. We had to scale up very quickly. So we've very quickly become the largest provider of at-risk youth services, specifically for foster kids in New York City. There's over 3,000 youth in our program in this past summer. Then we have a bunch more that are starting now a fall semester, but it's a much smaller scale because they're in school. And that's where we are today. We teach youth how they can become financially independent, working remotely from a computer from wherever they are. And we help the youth who don't have other options in life. They're on a track that makes them statistically likely to become homeless or incarcerated, all of our youth. That's what we do. Now, moving forward, we have several initiatives we know we want to do. We started to expand out toward to other states in America, because we were New York centric while we were physically limited into our classrooms. And we started to move out to other states. And we have commitments now, classes now from Kansas City, Missouri, and Phoenix, Arizona, and a few other places. And we're looking to grow. So I'd actually kind of like the collective minds of everyone in this Harvard group to potentially throw out ideas, if you have them, of how to help us, how we can help ourselves, if that's possible. So we're trying to grow nationwide, and we know the youth love our program, and we know that we have a good program that the kids really love. They give us these video-based testimonials back. It's all over YouTube. You can search YouTube for the name of our charity, Techie Youth, and you'll see the kids raving about it. And we have this thing that we want to do nationwide, but we are financially limited. We are not a big charity in terms of money. Any 501c3, the finances are transparent. And anyone can see that we operate on about 1/20th or 5% of the budget of other charities serving 3,000 plus constituents for a 150-hour-long program, which is what our program length is. So we're literally at 1/20th or 5% of the typical budget. If anyone has suggestions how we can scale on such a limited budget to be nationwide, we're all ears. So far, several counties in the United States have committed to us and given us small classes, and it is working. We just need to grow faster, bigger, and all that. And I'm going to throw the second challenge out to this Harvard group, and I hope maybe get some ideas. By the way, put them in the chat. I like the feedback. I like to hear what you guys are thinking. I'm going to stop myself and read the last comment. More media exposure, opening up to other chapters. How do I pronounce your name? Christy?
Yes, I wanted to just open it up to get everyone, involved here. So let's, if we can come up with some solutions, of course, and also how we can all get involved. But let's first start off with some ideas for you. Okay.
Should we wait for people?
Yeah, let's wait for some approach foundations, Emily Allen says. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we do some foundation grant applications. We do put them in. They're very time consuming, and they're worth it. I'm not saying they're not, but it's not a simple solution, because it takes many hours of effort for every foundation that you apply to, and there's a ratio of how many you have to apply to in order to win those foundations. Partner with Brain Trust to get your community hired. Okay, I'm not familiar with Brain Trust, but we prior to 2020, we were placing all of our youth. We have an employee who did nothing but place youth into job opportunities. Then came March of 2020, and 4 youth had interviews lined up, and all 4 of the interviewers canceled the interviews, which was very disappointing to these youth who had earned the interview and were on track to get a job, and that all sort of fell through. So we put the hiring part aside for now, and it's not to say we won't come back to it. We're not ready for that, because now we suddenly have 3,000 youth in our program, and we have to do it in a much more scalable way than we were doing before. So we will get there, presumably within a year or so, but I don't see that happening during 2021.
Keep them coming, everyone.
I'm gonna throw out the other challenge that we have. So we have a partnership with a tech community in the country of Nigeria, and they're a community with like 2,000 youth in it who are into tech, and it's more of like a community group. It's not. I don't know if they have a physical location or not, but I think they have a small computer center there. But either way, the organizer of that loves Techie Youth and said he wants to start enrolling the youth in our program. And he managed to get about 30 kids in, which is fairly decent considering he only just started this like 2 or 3 weeks ago. In the process, though, we also had interest opt-in, like a mailing list opt-in from about 20,000 different youth across English-speaking regions of Asia and Africa. We've been collecting their interest, their opt-in interest over the last year. And we don't really know how to get them engaged. We tried an experimental program where we invited a bunch of them to start using the program, and they didn't stick around the same way United States youth did. So we've been looking for incentives we can provide them to basically get them to continue the program. We kind of thought that the U.S. dollar goes so much farther in those countries that it would be a no-brainer, but apparently you still need to motivate youth no matter where they are in the world. We don't know how to solve that either. So if you could think of a motivating factor to get youth in relatively poor regions of the world that speak English engaged so they continue, because our program is 150 hours long. That is a lot of commitment. That's like the equivalent of one full semester in school. So it is a big commitment. We're looking for incentives that we can provide them that work. We can't pay them because our budget is not there, but we can do other incentives potentially. So I'm all ears. Just for the context, we do also offer a certificate of completion to every youth who finishes our program. So they get a genuine credential that goes on their resume and an actual physical laminated certificate. It's a beautiful certificate with a gold seal on it. I kind of should have brought one as a prop for this, I just realized. So they get an actual certificate. It looks like a diploma. It's very similar to a diploma, but it says Certificate of Completion from Techie Youth. So they get a credential out of this. It's a big deal. A lot of the youth, when they are presented with it, because we do that in person for the ones who do want to come into our classroom facility, it's like some of them get teary-eyed because it's like a big deal. We've had plenty of youth tell us they've never earned any form of like official credential like that. It was the first time in their life they've achieved something to a completion and got acknowledgement of that nature. It's amazing when you see the reactions of some of them. There was a question in the chat: are the youth pre-university? Very good question. So the majority of our youth probably are, but plenty of them are dropping out of high school, and some of them are in college already, but the majority are somehow finished with school, be it they graduated high school or dropped out and are not in school. And they're mostly around age 16 to 18 in our program. We accept all youth age 13 to 24, but like probably 80% of the youth in our program are age 16 to 18. I'm open for questions if anyone wants to throw them my way, or advice, or.
So, I mean, I think also, we can turn it over to folks, who have questions, but I personally have a question in terms of just where we can find you, how people can get involved if they want to donate their time, their money, et cetera. Can you give us a little bit about that?
Okay, so first off, donating time is a little bit more challenging now that we're all remote. When we were operating out of our facility, which we did just this past summer, it was a little different, but we're not going to do that for the year round when the kids are in school because of the economics of doing that. We're full remote right now. But everything donation wise or contact for volunteering opportunities, all that can come. I'd suggest going on our website, looking what we do, and then reaching out to us or making the donation online. Our website is www.techieyouth.org. That's TECHIEYOUTH.org. I'm going to stick it into the chat so everyone can see it in case I didn't dictate that clear enough. So.
Perfect. Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, you alluded to it in terms of COVID. I mean, how hard has that been? People wrote in that question, so wanted to get a little more feedback.
Yeah, so actually in our case, it was our stepping stone to grow past the physical ceiling of our location. People say that like that as an expression. The ceiling was our actual ceiling. Our facility is a huge 64-seat classroom in Long Island City, Queens, New York, and that was limiting. We could only get 2 classes a day because they're 5 hours long, and that means we had a limit of how many youth we can serve. So immediately, as soon as we switched to remote learning, it took away the ceiling. So for us, in terms of program growth, it's been a benefit. Obviously, the world, it's a horrible situation, but in terms of the pace at which we just grew in the last year is kind of mind-blowing, because we were not even told we were going to get that many. We told New York City we can take up to about 1,000 youth, and they said, okay, no problem. Here's your list of youth coming, and it's like 3,000 kids long. So we didn't quite anticipate that, but the truth is the ideas also came as a response to the world's problems. In other words, ideas to teach youth how to earn money independently while working remotely was also a response to the need in the world not to commute and the benefits of not commuting. I'm a big believer in doing as much as possible remote, if that works, if that's something. I mean, obviously there are professions you can't do that, like a doctor has to physically be there, but there are plenty of things you can do in this world that has no real reason not to do remote. And we have so many different tracks in our program. The youth can choose from over 20 of them, ranging from trading stocks and cryptocurrencies to video editing, programming in artificial intelligence. And we have so many different things that they can choose from. And all of them are entirely capable to do without ever setting foot in a physical office anywhere. So honestly, in our situation, we are doing better now than pre-COVID, but that is a response to supplying a service that is necessary now and really was much less necessary before.
So I want to turn it a little bit over to your background because it's certainly an impressive one. Can you just also explain, your path in the tech space and how you got involved with Techie Youth? Obviously, we talked about, hearing the statistics, hearing the personal stories of at-risk youth, but can you just give us a bit about your trajectory, because it's interesting.
So as I mentioned before, it sort of fell in my lap. I didn't know about foster care before I started with it. But what happened was, as I sort of got into it and I realized these kids can all learn tech, it's entirely an attainable talent, or not talent's not the right word, entirely attainable skills for pretty much anybody who goes through a program and is coached to learn about it. It became clear that there's a solution here and that we don't have to have this sort of terrible outcomes, and technology can be the saving grace. I have been the organizer of the New York City's Database Month Festival of Data Tech for many years. I grew a community that is currently 26,000 plus people in the world's largest data tech community. I knew one thing. I knew that I could grow communities. And when the youth were engaging in our program at the very beginning, when we started in November 2015, I knew that if it works for a small group, I could grow it to be big. And it took a little bit of time, and it took a little adjustment. Like as mentioned, also July 2016, we started taking other youth in addition to foster kids, but they were all youth who have very heartbreaking and major life challenges. I mean, things that when you see a youth on the news for anything good or bad, whether they committed a crime or whether they were that youth that was like locked in their house and no one knew they existed, we get them in our program. That's the youth that come to our program. It's like amazing. You can, like, the youth in our program, if you Google some of their names, you see the news stories about them. It's that bad. So once we started opening up to that, and I realized this world is full of youth who need us, and technology can save them. I mean, maybe not all of them, but definitely a lot of them. My heart sort of became dedicated to this, and little by little, it became my full-time objective of life. And originally, I was juggling and continuing the data tech profession, but then once the beginning of 2020 came in, I realized this is growing too quickly for me to multitask, and it's become my full-time role for the last almost 2 years now. But I've been in tech for my whole career. Was working at Yahoo at one point in a senior role there. I've been a CTO of several companies. I love tech. It's just been me. It's who I am, I guess. So.
Well, so do we at Harvard in Tech. And I think, that's why this is such an important webinar. I mean, it's interactive, but also, hearing about all the great work you're doing and how we can help spread the word. So I'm going to open it up one last time to questions from our audience. But if not, if you have any last questions, Eric, I mean, also if you could provide us with, your information, how we can get a hold of you, how we can facilitate any sort of, help here and support for a great organization.
So the thing that's interesting is we have 3,000 youth in our program. We're becoming nationwide, although we're just at the beginning of that part. We are the largest provider of such service in New York City, all these big things, and yet I'm still the one answering the email on the website. And I also do answer our youth when they have support questions. We have a team of about 60 people who help answer the questions of the youth. At least we did during the summer. We scaled it down a little post-summer. But we had about 60 people. All of them were employed in third world countries where the US dollar is extremely needed and goes a lot farther. So the majority of our youth were, the majority of our chat workers were in Rwanda and the Philippines. Both places where they need US dollars and they speak English very well. So they have been our staff for the summer. I would jump on those chats and end up answering youth on there as well. So I'm very easy to find. It's not hard to catch me. If you send an email to the email on the website, which I stuck into the chat, techieYouth.org, there's an email link on the website. I'll be the recipient of that. If I'm not the right person, I do just forward it to who is at our organization, but we're not big. That's the crazy thing. 3,000 plus constituents in this current past summer, 800 prior to that. And yet we are a very small team of, I lost track already. If you don't count our offshore chat team, we are like less than a dozen people with this enormous amount. Our offshore chat is like 60 plus chat people, and I honestly don't know all of their names at this point because we have someone who does nothing but manage that, just because the team, it grew so quickly over the summer. But I'm easy to find. It's not hard to find me. You know, if you stick your questions into our chat, if you were a youth, obviously this group is not, but I mean, I might be the one to answer that. Although I don't put my real name in there. I learned that technique actually from Craig Newmark, the founder of Craig of Craigslist, who's one of our main benefactors. He's giving us the majority of our support, and I understand that he used to do that. So that was the incentive for that. But you really do learn a lot when you see what the youth ask. The questions they ask, it's rarely something that you anticipated while building the system. Usually you learn a lot from answering customer questions, not always, but usually. So we have a lot of interaction. There's a lot of FaceTime with our youth. I don't mean the Apple app, I mean FaceTime, like individual FaceTime. We make sure that our team is very interactive with the youth. A lot of the participants from this last summer, if you watch the YouTube videos of their feedback, which just go on YouTube and search for Techie Youth, and you can see dozens and dozens of student videos talking about our program. A lot of them will tell you that, like, I can't believe how fast the chat answers my questions. And several of them said, I thought they were robots. And then so I started asking them weird questions to see if they're really human, and they are. Like, it's the responses are really funny. One of them wrote, it's funny because I saw the chat. I read the chat logs also to make sure everything is what we expect it to be in terms of the interaction. But one of them said something funny. They wrote something like, are you a robot or a real person? If you're a real person, write orange or banana or something. And then the person says, I kind of like tomatoes better.
Yeah.
It was just cute. And they were like, oh my God, you're real. It's a cool thing when you have this quantity of youth, and it's a lot of fun. So anyway, to answer back to your question, I went a little on a tangent. I'm easy to find. Just go to the website. You can email the email address on the website, and I will be the initial responder to that.
Yeah, and then there's a comment here. Educate the folks who are graduating too. They can obviously I'm sure you're doing this already, but attract sponsors, attract proof of concept. I mean, I'm sure you're already doing that, but I think that's also another avenue to gain more, eyes and sponsorships that way too.
That's an interesting point. So we don't ever ask our youth to do anything to give us money, meaning that we never ask money from them. That's obvious. And we also don't want them fundraising for us. We think that's going to blur the lines and make them feel indebted to us. So we won't do that recommendation that was just put in there. Although we do, in theory, that would be a very powerful resource to have 3,800 youth trying to raise funds for us. We don't want to do that. We want them to raise funds for themselves, because if they become financially stable and self-sufficient, that's a case study for us of success, and that's what we were really aiming for. And the fundraising, although we need it, we'll deal with it. We don't want them to deal with that.
I think that's great. And, as you said too, it's not just, the interaction, initial interaction. You're actually teaching people to go on and have their careers in this space for longevity. And that's what we appreciate in the organization as well. So we're getting some more questions. This might be our last question here from Zelalam. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you rely on any volunteer instructors, example, taking current tech workers willing to volunteer?
So we don't have volunteer instructors. We pay our teachers, and that's because we want to make sure we are getting a professional education experience from them. And the main reason is if someone treats it like a job, they're going to show up every day. And if someone treats it like a volunteer role, if they have something better to do, they may not show up, and we don't want that. We did have, I should say past tense, in this past summer, we had interns. We usually get about 20 interns per semester just because of the amount of youth that we have in our program, and they become like a teacher's aide. However, we are right now, at the end of the summer, we swapped to being full virtual, so that's no longer really necessary at the moment to be like a teaching. That's a very common question. Everybody wants to interact with the youth, but there's also the other aspect that every intern and person who's in our classroom for more than a momentary timing does need to go through a background check, and that there's an expense with that. They're not cheap, those background checks. So we don't have volunteers. It's literally easier just to pay someone to make sure that we don't waste the money on doing background checks and someone who's going to show up once and not come back. So it was more for maintaining quality of care and then the economics of ensuring that they are there every day.
Right. And again, yeah, that longevity too, that they're consistently there. Well, Eric, I think our time is up, but I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. We all learned a lot about Techie Youth, and of course, we'll be sending out this webinar and all of your information on our mailing list. But we appreciate your time, and yeah, everyone, if you send in your questions via the chat, it'll likely be Eric. But yeah, thank you so much. Really cool program, and glad to support and all the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much. It was a blast being here. And I appreciate everybody at Harvard listening to our cause, learning about our cause. And if you could spread the word to anyone you know who can fund our cause, send them to our website to give donations. We really need it. As mentioned before, we're on 5% of the budget of other organizations doing this. So we're really pretty cash strapped. We make a lot out of a little, and that's our methodology to be operating as lean as possible so we can help the most youth as possible. So please help us help them.
Thank you, Eric. Take care, everyone, and stay well.
Thank you.